So, guys, welcome to Nashik MuleSoft Meetup 6th. And the topic for today's meetup is like CICD on RTF, which is hosted on the self-managed GKE. GKE is nothing; it's a Google Kubernetes engine using Jenkins. Okay. So, Siddhima will going to cover this particular topic, like how you can deploy the application on runtime fabric, which is running as a self-managed Kubernetes, and she will be definitely going to use Jenkins and Maven plugin for doing this particular deployment. So let me start with safe harbor statement. So both speaker and host are organizing this meetup in the individual capacity, and we are not representing any organization or any companies here. Basically, just we are here to just share knowledge, and also we don't hold any responsibility whether whatever we are presenting here that will work for your business requirement or not. You may have to do some changes maybe for your requirement. Yeah, this is just for the knowledge purpose, and this presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. We just here to share the knowledge. We are just here to share our experience on what we have done with our customers, basically. Okay. Housekeeping. So basically you can find the recording of this particular meetup on the event page within 24 hours. You can submit or you can ask question at any time. Try to make the session as interactive as possible. And the finally we just motivate everyone to provide the feedback. This will help us to improve in the future, and like for selecting the topic depending on your feedback. So, organizer, I will just skip my introduction, and I think Ankur is not available in today's meetup. Okay, so yeah, Siddhima, you can share your screen and you can just take the meetup from here. I will just stop sharing.
Yeah, sure.
I
Thanks.
will go on mute.
Yeah. So thanks, Jitendra, for this opportunity. So I'll quickly share my screen. So let me know if I'm able. You're able to see
Yes.
my screen. You're able to. Okay. Okay. So I'm Siddhama Tigidi, and I have over 14 plus years of experience, out of which 10 plus years is more into integration sphere. Basically, more of integration patterns and APIs. So that's my experience overall. So currently, I'm working with Devoting here in Netherlands. Um, so today's topic, right? So today's topic, the topic that we have today is for implementing CI/CD on RTF, and what we have picked, the RTF flavor that we have picked is GKE GKE self-managed Kubernetes. So RTF is hosted on GKE on a self-managed Kubernetes, and we will implement our CI/CD on this flavor. So to summarize the agenda for this meetup, we are first going to understand what is CI/CD, understand what is branching strategy, and the deployment approach specifically for RTF, how it is different from the Cloud Hub or any other platform deployments that you usually do. So there is a little bit of a change, so you'll want to understand what that is. We will be using the connected apps to make this deployment. We'll use the connected app and we will generate the auth token and then use that auth token to do the deployment. So I will explain that approach. We'll try and understand when we deploy this Mule application, where does it land? How does it look like? Because it is a containerized, what you're trying to do is you're trying to deploy this application onto Kubernetes. So basically, a pod is created, and then within that you have the container in which your Mule application runs. So we want to understand that. And then we will quickly understand what are the simple steps that you need to do to set up your CI/CD pipeline on Jenkins and accomplish the deployment, the automated deployment. So that's the agenda for today's call. Um, so so let's understand what is continuous integration. Okay, so when I say continuous integration, I mean it's a practice and a coding philosophy, right? That makes it easier for the development teams to prepare, to implement and to run quality control on a release, right? So you're not doing anything manually. You're actually, the minute the code is pushed to the version control, you're able to pick that code and create a build out of it. So that is the whole idea of your continuous integration. So the goal of continuous integration is to basically automate and ensure consistency in the way we do the build, test, and package the applications, right? And we are using that now. Most of our projects, I'm sure, who are following all the best practices, they definitely implement these CI/CDs. um, so this provides you the benefit, such as, you can reduce the error prone deployments that can happen through manual deployments, right? So this is the idea of having a continuous integration. When you talk about only CI, it's pulling the code from the version control, or the source, and then creating a build out of it continuously as the developer creates the or makes the changes to the application, or the code. So when we say, now the next word that we know is the continuous delivery. Okay. So when we say CD, you mean you're going to deploy it onto the environment, whichever it could be, right? Your RTF or Cloud Hub, any of that. So in our context, when we say continuous delivery, we mean delivery of the code, that is the deployment. And this is done based on, once you have set up your CI/CD in such a way that, you have reached a point of um, you've reached a point of continuous integration. You've created a jar which you know is in a shape where it can be deployed onto the environment. You will probably pull that jar from Artifactory, and you'll keep deploying it, and this whole thing will be automated. So continuous delivery is the other end of the CI/CD pipeline. It automates the delivery of application and code changes to Artifactory repositories, and you can do this deployment to multiple infrastructures and environments. So you build it once, and you can deploy it to development, to your staging environment, test environment, and then to your production. So you build once and you deploy anywhere. That should be the idea. There are multiple ways of doing that. We will discuss that as we proceed in this discussion. All right. And definitely the CI/CD will help you achieve the benefits. Would be, you'll be able to automate this whole thing and save a lot of time, and you'll be able to do away with any of the manual errors that happen due to manual deployment. So this is the idea of basic CI/CD. Um, so let's understand what is RTF deployment approach, right? So first of all, before you start off with your RTF or any deployment, the first thing that you need to do is you need to come up with a branching strategy. Here is a sample illustrative branching strategy that is depicted. You can have a different, you can have n number of environments, and you can have different what is that, branches that you might create. Here we have taken an example of just like 2 or 3 environments here. Definitely you'll have production. We have a test environment called as UAT, and then you have, definitely you'll have a develop environment where the developer would create his application, test it. You could also have one more environment like a sandbox, or you could treat your development environment itself like sandbox. And release environment would be somewhere, or the UAT would be an environment where somewhere your application would be tested end to end by, with integrated with the end systems. And then you, once you've tested it, you've achieved your standardization or baseline of your code, you've tagged it, you'd move to production. So this is a general sample. It's illustrative sample where we talk of you having the feature branch where you might be using Jira, or you might be using ServiceNow or any other tool for creating your tasks for your development. And you'd use that as a naming convention. You could use anything as per your customer requirement, and you'd probably create a feature branch, and you will use that for all your development, and then merge it into your develop branch, right? And from your development branch, once you have actually done the testing, unit testing, and you've kind of you have completed the development, you would merge this code into your say release branch, and the code from release branch would get deployed to your UAT environment, and the code probably from your development environment would get deployed to your develop or a test environment, right? But the best practice or the ideal way of doing the CI/CD, I'm just taking these 2 environments right now as an example, develop and UAT, would be that the minute you deploy and complete your testing in your development environment, you should be able to push the same jar into the Artifactory, and then take that as your baseline code and take that jar file and deploy it into your UAT environment. You should not be doing a fresh build. You should probably use the same jar file to deploy into the UAT. The only change that will happen during deployment is you override the properties of that environment. So that way, your same jar file will get propagated to different environments. That is one of the approaches. We will see that in detail. But the idea is to have a branching strategy like this. And once you have the code in UAT and you've tested, you're done with it, now you have now you have the approvals to go to production. You would merge this code, you'll raise a pull request, you'll merge this code to the master or the main branch, and from your main branch, you'll again, you'll actually push the code to production. So we will try to understand this more. Some basic branches that we also create are the hotfix branches, bug fix branches. So the hot fixes go to the production, right? If you have any issues in production and you want a quick fix, you'd probably do that in the master branch, and you immediately deploy it to the production. And if you have any bug fixes, you would probably, in your lower environment, you'd probably create a bug fix, taking your specific branch as a reference, right? So there are different ways of doing the branching strategy. There is no set rule that it has to be done in a one specific way. This is just an illustrative example, right? So in your projects, you might be using different methods of doing that. You might have multiple environments, or you might have very limited environments. So based on that, you can take a call. But this is just one of a example. Okay, so first thing that we did was we created a pipe. We defined the branching strategy for our code. All right. Next, we need to understand how this entire deployment to runtime fabric happens, and how is this different from what we do for, say, Cloud Hub. We can take a reference of Cloud Hub and kind of compare it with that and see what's the difference, right? So if you look at this, um, first of all, in your API development cycle, as you guys might already know, that you have you'll use your design center to create your API specification using RAML or IO, or your Swagger, right? So once you've created the API specification, you will implement that in the you'll implement that in the studio. Okay, you'll import that raml and implement that. But even before doing that, you'll probably publish that to the exchange, so that you get a feedback, and you have from your business analyst or from your stakeholders. Once you have baselined, or you've finalized your API specification, you'll use that specification to um, develop that application using your studio, right? And once you have done your development, you'd push that code to the version control. It could be anything. It could be Git, it could be Bitbucket, or any other version control tool. So once you have put the code into the version control, um, you should be able to deploy this application to the environment. So how would you do that, right? So basically, in your version control, I might just interrupt. Am I audible? Are people able to hear me?
Yes, yeah, you are able to.
I was a little worried that, I'm just speaking to myself, and okay, I'm audible. Great. So basically, once you have the code in the version control, what would you do? Here, your branching strategy kicks in. But let's assume we just have one branch. We have a dev branch. Let's just assume so. So what would happen is, in your uh, you would use a methodology like, say, Maven, to do a build and deploy. So here, first thing that you would want to do is push that code. You'd create a build and then push that code into the Artifactory. It could be, say, something like Nexus, or a JFrog or something like that, right? So you'd use any Artifactory tool to push that into the Artifactory. And then once you've done that, you would first publish this asset or this jar file to the exchange. That is the first step. All right. And once you have published it to the exchange, then what would happen is, you'd need to script it in such a way that the second deploy command would be able to pull this asset from the exchange and deploy it onto the runtime fabric cluster. So now the change that you see here at this point is very important to note, is that the current RTF architecture works in this way that they have this containerized Kubernetes cluster where your pods are present, right? Pods get created or spun up in which you have the container and your Mule application runs within that container, right? So the minute your application is published to Exchange, the runtime fabric cluster treats this exchange as a place from where you can pull the assets to have a higher availability. Like for example, the one of the pod goes down, or the application somehow is not accessible, or there's an issue, and then in that case what would happen is it will just pull that copy from the exchange and deploy it into your um, it will create a pod and deploy that in the container. So that's what actually happens in case of RTF. So if you think you can so this is very important, these two steps are very important, is first publishing the asset to Exchange, and then you should be able to run the mvn deploy command to the deployment to the runtime fabric cluster. But if you're trying to just do the mvn deploy directly to the cluster, if you just try to run, and if you're trying to deploy it, you would notice that the deployment will not go through because your asset does not exist in the Exchange. So that is very, very important to note, that you need to do these two steps for this deployment, and that is what we will see when we see the implementation of the CI/CD. So then some of you might have a question now, that since we already Exchange is behaving like a repository, it is a repository, right? It's an artifact, and you already have your asset published to Exchange, then why then should you probably also maintain a Nexus repository, or you want to maintain a JFrog artifact repository where you have the build? So I would put it this way, that currently it might just sound technically, it's still possible, you without even putting um, the asset to your business Nexus or a JFrog kind of a artifactory, you could still do just these two steps and it'll get deployed. But the reason why you should have this one is because here you can probably maintain your business releases, right? So you might have, say, in a quarter you have one release, and in every quarter you have a release. You say release one, release two, something like that. So there should be a place where you should be able to control and say, okay, for this particular release we are having these artifactories. So tomorrow, if you want to, probably you might have the assets in the Exchange, but it might be a bit messy to maintain it there. So you should have a clean place where you could probably maintain it. And if tomorrow you want to clean up the Exchange, or kind of delete some assets from it, you can still pull your assets from your artifactory. So that would be I would say, one of the approaches to implement the CI/CD. Regarding, okay, this is one aspect of it. Here we also talking about promoting an API in the API manager. So you can also promote your API. So basically what you do is, when you're building your APIs, you create a API instance in your API manager, which will give you the API ID for auto discovery. So even that can be automated through in this CI/CD pipeline. And there are anypoint REST APIs available through which you can do this API promotion, right? So this is the overall idea of how a CI/CD would look like for a runtime fabric. All right. So going ahead, let's understand. So what are the different ways in which you can actually do a deployment to runtime fabric, right? So there are three ways. One is definitely you go to your runtime manager and you do deploy your applications. A very simple approach, right? A very manual way. You would navigate to the runtime manager and then select your jar file. You'll upload it and then you can deploy it. So the simple manual approach. And then the second one, to automate, you would use a Mule Maven plugin, okay, and use some build and deploy tool. In our case, we are going to use Jenkins to do that. You could use Azure DevOps or any other tool to build and deploy the application. Sorry. And the third approach, and also you'd use it also because one is Mule Maven plugin, and then you can also use the Anypoint platform APIs, REST APIs. Okay, I think this is spelled wrong here. It should be REST APIs, basically Anypoint platform, yeah, runtime manager APIs. So basically we have three ways we can say, which we know, which through which we can deploy, right? Now, this is something that you already know, that you will have, these are the tools that are required to accomplish your CI/CD, right? You definitely need a version control. It could be GitHub, it could be GitLab, it could be Bitbucket or anything else, right? And then you would need a build and deploy tool. So you could use a Jenkins, you could use Bamboo, Circle CI, different build and deploy tools are available. Even Azure DevOps you can use. Yeah, so those are the options that we know of, which are popularly used. Then you would need an artifactory repository, say like Nexus or JFrog. Yeah, and Maven definitely you will require, because you'll need to connect to your enterprise Maven repository to pull your jars which are related to your connectors and so on and so forth, right? So let's understand how this, just try to understand how this deployment would work end to end in a sequential fashion, right? So if you look at this, the minute the user, so when you automate this entire CI/CD, this is how the workflow would look like, right? Or the sequence would look like.
Uh, One question here, Siddhima. Like, can you just check the chat window? There is a one question.
Oh, is it? All right, let me just go there. Not able to see. Okay, I can see the chat window. Yeah.
It's at the end. Like, yeah.
Yeah, API promotion means increasing asset version in API manager. API promotion, yes, it would be. Yes, you're right. It would be that, and also it would be creating a instance. So first time when you do, you will be creating a new instance. It will give you the API ID and all of that. And asset version would be when you're making any changes to your API, right? When you're doing the deployment, you will have published, you would have made some changes to your YAML, or you would have incorporated a new resource path, and you will have incremented the patch version or the minor version of the API. Yes, that's right. Does that answer your question, Rajesh? Yeah. Okay. All right. So quickly, I'll go through this one. So basically, trying to understand the sequential flow of how this CI/CD would look like. So when you automate this whole process, this is how it would be probably looking like, at least in the illustrative example that we have set up. So basically, what would happen is the minute your Jenkins receives a trigger from the source control, either through a webhook or through maybe a polling of the changes to the version control, it will kickstart. The first thing that this Jenkins pipeline would do is it will download the artifact from the artifact repository. In our case, it will be just the Maven repository. It will pull all the required jars and it will create a build, right? So it will create that build. Once that has happened, it will upload the artifact only if the artifact of the same version does not exist in the exchange. This is a tricky one. You might want to notice this. We will see this later. I think I got another chat. Is there any other question? No, right? Yeah. So this is the tricky one here. So basically, what happens is when you have already created the build, you'll first step, which I already told you, is that you'll be trying to publish the asset to the exchange. And when you're trying to publish to the exchange, if the version of that asset already exists in the exchange, it will not go through, because it actually checks if that asset is already there, right? Like for example, you're trying to publish an asset or a API with a version of 1.0.0, and if that is already existing in the exchange, your deployment, this publishing to the exchange will not happen, right? So you need to increment that version to say 1.0.1 and then publish it to the exchange. Okay. And then Once you've done publishing to the exchange, the second step would be, this is important, you will be triggering the deployment to the runtime manager by giving all the different parameters to your MVN deploy command, giving the org ID, the platform credentials, the application name, the CPU size, the memory size, all of that, right? So you'll be giving all those parameters, and then you'll be doing a full-fledged deployment to your runtime, basically to the RTF cluster. Okay. Um, Once this deployment has happened, is completed, so you're done with it. So that's how this works. But one important thing to notice is that you should always keep in mind that unless this step goes through, unless the step 3 happens, okay, for your artifact or for your application, mule application, your fourth step will not get executed. You need to ensure that your asset is existing in the exchange, only then your deployment will go through. Okay, that is important. um, okay, so basically we need to, so in our demo today, the approach that we will be taking for the deployment, we mentioned three methods of deployment. The manual one, using your going through the runtime manager and uploading your job. The second one is your Mule Maven plugin, and then the third is the REST API. So we are using the Mule Maven plugin to do our deployments. So you need to understand how the what are the different configurations you need to do in your mule in your pom file, right? So definitely you need to have the version, the group id, um, the group id, and the artifact, the version, and these details should be there, right? Then you should definitely have the distribution management details, through which it will be able to pull all the um, jars, right, and be able to deploy. um, and then you'll be using the mule deploy command. You'll be using the same mule deploy command to publish to the exchange, and also to deploy the application on the runtime cluster, sorry, the RTF cluster. So I'll show you that quickly when we go to the demo. Here, there's an illustrative example of how you can do this using Anypoint API. So, using your Anypoint API, first thing, there are couple of bunch of APIs which are available. One to actually deploy to the runtime fabric cluster, and also to delete the asset from the exchange, or to search the asset from the exchange whether it exists. So there are different APIs available. I will not go deep down into this. We'll share this information with you. You can explore it. So you can use these Anypoint APIs to also automate your deployment. So quickly, let's look at the POM file here. I will also show it to you in the studio, but just for your information. So if you look at this one, if you compare this with the actual Cloud Hub deployment that you do, in that POM file, you'll see something like a Cloud Hub deployment right here in this Mule Maven plugin. Right, this is a Mule Maven plugin, and in this, your entire so in case of runtime fabric, you will have this configuration as runtime fabric deployment, and then you'll have the URI, the provider, you'll have the environment details, the target. The target would be your RTF cluster, the mule version. So everything is parameterized here, but we will show it to you when we deploy it in the script, so you can have a look at how it would look like. You'll definitely give the business group ID, okay, of your Anypoint platform. Then you'll have rest of other configurations, like replication factor, right? So how many replicas do you want to run, right? What is the CPU reserved cores that you want to allocate? What is the CPU max size that you want to set? So these can all be parameterized, and you can pass it to the deployment command when you're making the deployment. The amount of memory reserved, the public URL that you want to use for your application, all these values can be fed through the deployment command. Of course, the classifier is mule application, and sorry, yeah. So that's about your Maven command. And if you look at it, it is again the same mvn clean deploy command, and it has all the properties which we will keep feeding. I'll show it to you when I run the demo. right? So this is important to understand, that you need to have this in your in your the Mule application that you build. You need to ensure your POM is standardized and it has this structure, so that your deployment will work. Okay, that's very important. Again, this is an example of how you could trigger a deployment using Anypoint API, which we would, it's just for your reference. You can explore it, but we would be using the Mule Maven plugin. All right. This is the overall idea of how you can achieve an end-to-end CI/CD. Okay, that is build once, deploy anywhere. I'll come back to this one at the end of this demo. Okay, so that you are able to understand it better. But the whole idea is, maybe for a lower environment in develop, you would want to have a simple deployment, and for the higher environments, you would want to have uh, a much more of a robust way of deployment, where you just do the CI once in one pipeline, and then there's a different CD pipeline which will probably pull the artifact which has been built in the CI pipeline. It will pull that asset and it will deploy it into the different environments by overriding the environment variables. That's the whole idea. We can again revisit this concept towards the end if you have questions. Again, explain it to you. Um, In our example today, we will be using the connected app, and we'll use that connected app to get the auth token. Okay. And we'll use that auth token to make the deployment. Okay. So when you create when you create a connected app in any point platform, all that you need to do is you need to go to your access management. Okay. And then go to the connected app option and go with the option 2 which says apps act on behalf of. Okay, so go with this option and then say add scopes, and these will be the listed scopes that you actually require. You just need to add these scopes in for your specific environment and create your connected app. Once you've created the connected app, you will see an option to select the client ID and secret from that connected app, and you should be able to use that client ID and secret along with the grant type to generate the access token for you. So I think yeah, so I can show that to you, when we run the demo. I'll show it to you how that actually looks like. I can go to the runtime manager and just show you how the connected app looks like and how you're able to generate the access token. So basically, if you're seeing this is a curl command. So basically, this you can use the same one, uh, in your use the same URL in your Postman, and you will have to pass the client ID. You see this, the client ID and the client secret along with the grant type, which is fixed, which is client credentials. And when you run that, you will get the access token. Okay, this is a script basically, so you can use this one as well. This is the same script you can actually use in your CI/CD pipeline. All right, but if you're running it from your Postman just to see how you can fetch the auth token for this REST API call, you can basically use this endpoint, and in your body you will have to pass these values. Okay, this content, this JSON structure. Okay, if you want to check if an asset already exists, you can run this script. Okay, so it will work. Just a point for you to note, we're using the word JQ here. So in this specific script, okay, if you're using this in your shell script, or you're using it in your pipeline, you will need to ensure that you have configured JQ. Okay, what JQ does is it's a utility which will help you to parse a JSON. All right, the response that you get back from this REST APIs is in a JSON structure, and to parse through that JSON, right, you can use JQ. All right, so you'll need to set that up. All right. So these are again a couple of bunch of more APIs which you can actually call to get the details of your application. Okay. So retrieving the environment ID or retrieving the deployment ID and other details, right? So if you want to get those information, this is for much more advanced CI/CD which you can do. It's just more of a reference. You can give it a try. The one which we will be doing is much more simpler. So I'll just explain to you the basics there, and you can take that one step ahead when you try to do it yourself. Um, this is important here because we are using this. So in our settings.xml, you need to ensure that you have this configuration set up wherein you are giving the server ID of the exchange, and then you're also mentioning the exactly, you just, it needs to match exactly what is mentioned here. The username needs to be the token, and the password needs to be whatever the value, this value, it needs to exactly match this. And then in your pom.xml, you need to have a placeholder which will, basically you're trying to inject that auth token into your pom.xml. Okay, so you need to have a placeholder which will pick it up. And why do you need this auth token? You need this auth token, or you need any kind of credentials. It could be user ID, password, it could be a auth token, or it could be a connected app ID and connected app secret, you might be using along with grant type. So all, any of these three options, you will require that, because your application, when you're deploying it using your Maven plugin, it needs to know, uh, these authentication tokens will help it to do a handshake with your anypoint platform environment. So that's the reason you need these authentication configurations, and this is important. Okay, just keep that in mind. Then coming to the Jenkins file, I'll show it to you when I create the pipeline. So that should be very simple. We are not doing this Nexus part for the demo purpose, definitely, but we will be doing these two steps, that is deploying to the exchange and deploying it to the runtime fabric cluster. Okay, these two will definitely be doing. And this command which you see here is going to be much more elaborate. This is just for illustrative purpose, but it will have many more configurations that you will see when we run it. Okay, so this is just an example of your Jenkins file, and this Jenkins file you can have within your Mule application that you're developing, and you will see when we create the Jenkins pipeline, we can just reference the Jenkins file from the pipeline itself. So you don't have to specifically go and script it in your hard code that into your pipeline. You can just reference it using a file. In our case, it's going to be a Jenkins file. Yeah, again, so this is again a POM file. I think we've seen this before. Very important that in your Mule Maven plugin structure, this configuration is very important. Sorry. Sorry. So you need to have this in place. So basically, there will be two commands that you'll be running. So you'll be having the ambient clean deploy, and then you'll be running the second command, which will deploy to the cluster. The first one will publish it to the exchange. Second one will actually deploy to the RTF cluster. These are some useful commands. Just to go, once you have deployed, you'd want to check where it is deployed. You'd want to look at the logs. You want to see your pod. You want to see the application that has been deployed, and you want to view the logs. So these are some useful commands which you can use on your RTF cluster. In our case, it will be GKE cluster, Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So important question, where does the Mule application reside in the RTF cluster? So what exactly happens is, um, if you want to understand more about RTF GKE, probably you can refer some old videos. I think there was another meetup where I did a complete GKE RTF cluster setup. And it is very simple. It just takes you like 15 minutes max, 15 to 20 minutes, not more than that. It's very simple. You can create a RTF cluster. You can refer that meetup video probably, and you can set it up yourself. Just a heads up for you, all the things that you'll require to set up your RTF cluster would be, first of all, your org admin should have given you access to the runtime fabric in that environment. Okay, say for your in dev environment, you should have access to the runtime fabric. That is first. And the second thing is, you should have a license key. You can download the license key from the basically that license key is nothing but it's a Mule runtime. So when you download your Mule runtime, you should be able to get the base 64 version of that license key from the unzipped version of that. What is that? The Mule runtime. Okay, so you can take the license key from them. So that is, license key is important. And the third thing that you would require is, I think, access to the in case when I'm talking about Google Cloud, you can just create a trial account for yourself. You'll get a 90 days trial account. I'm using the same. So with your ID, with your Gmail ID, you can just create a Google account, a trial account for and you'll have you can access it for almost 90 days, and they give you some basic package with that. So with that, you should be able to create your cluster and use that for your demo. I mean, you can use that for your hands-on experience. Okay, so that is how you can set up your cluster. So coming back to this one, right? Where is the Mule application deployed in your RTF? So first of all, you need to understand there's something called as a controller node and the worker node. Just to summarize and make it very simple for you, the controller node is the one which will kind of, it controls, it kind of orchestrates the or it acts as a interface between your control plane and your runtime plane worker node. Your worker node is a place where your Mule application gets deployed. Okay, within your worker node, this is a very clear depiction of a worker node. Within this worker node, you have a pod. You can see a pod here, and within this pod, you can see your Mule application deployed. So every application will have its own pod, and within each pod, you'll have the a Mule application deployed. Okay, so that's the understanding. This is your worker node, right? So you do not confuse yourself more. Just understand that within your worker node, you will have these Mule applications deployed, and how they are packaged is it'll spin up a pod. It'll spin up a pod for you, and within that you have the container where your application will be running. Okay. Um, so if you want to understand what is a controller node, worker node, and understand how the RTF architecture works, then you can probably refer some other meetup videos, and I'm sure there's a very nice one which Jitendra himself has done. So that is also a very good starting point, because all the RTFs, irrespective of self-managed or the ones which are using VM bare metal, they're pretty much the same. The only change is in case of self-managed, we have the controller node, it's completely taken care by the self-managed Kubernetes cluster. So you do not have to worry much about it. The only thing is in your worker node, you should be able to uh, see your applications. Okay. So you can just refer the old videos to understand more. But for you to understand the basics of this, where your application runs, just remember it runs in your worker node within the application pod, and within that you have the container, and within that it runs. Okay, so Mule application is basically running there, just for you to understand. So when I deploy, you should be able to understand where it is deployed and how it is running. So that's the reason I wanted to share this narration with you. All right. So just what are the prerequisites that are required for you to set up the CI/CD, right? So very simple. Very simple here. All that you need is you will require RTF clusters to be set up. As I told you, it will take you just 15 to 20 minutes for you to set up the cluster, not more than that, even less than that. In fact, just 15 minutes, you should be able to set up your RTF cluster. How to do that? You can refer other meetup videos where I've done one of them where we have set it up on GKE. You can use that as your reference and set it up for yourself. Then you have to install your Jenkins. The link will be shared with you. You can follow those steps and just set up your Jenkins. It is very simple. It doesn't take you, I think it's just like 15 minutes for you to set up a Jenkins. Then you have to ensure that you have these plugins installed. The JDK, Git, and Maven plugins are installed in your Jenkins. I'll show you where I have configured that so you understand. And then you just need to go to your have your application in your Git. Okay, push your code in Git, and then configure the Jenkins pipeline. That's it. And then if you have set up the trigger in your Jenkins pipeline, it'll automatically get triggered every time you make any change to your code in your version control, and it will continuously keep building and deploying. So that is your CI/CD. All right. Yeah. So I think I'll quickly jump to the demo. Jitendra, should I start with the demo? I think it's already 11:20. So am I audible? Can I start with the I can see a lot of questions here actually. Hello, am I audible? Can someone unmute
Hello,
me?
You are
can you hear me?
audible.
Yeah, yes, Jitendra.
Yes, let's make session bit interesting. Few questions to people like so how many guys have already worked on runtime fabric on virtual machine and the bare metal server? Does anybody have experience on working on setting up RTF on bare metal virtual machine, or like maybe on self managed Kubernetes?
Yes, Jitendra. Abhishek this side. So right now we are working. Our setup is on RTF only. So it's
RTF where?
self-managed Kubernetes cluster,
Okay. So can
and
you
we are
just share like,
recently we
can
are
you just share
recently
what are the
implementing.
challenges you, yeah,
Yes.
go on.
So the first challenge was the publishing the artifact to Exchange itself, where we were getting a lot of errors. And recently, what we have faced is MuleSoft has also recognized that there is a bug in their system. So whenever for RTF they change the Exchange API v2 from v1, then
Mhm.
the manual deployment starts interfering with that. So they've
Okay.
acknowledged it. They've also planned to release it into a new release. So that's what the biggest challenge we have faced. So
Okay.
for enabling this Jenkins pipeline, they've promoted the version of API Exchange v2, and then after that, manual deployment started failing. Before
Okay.
that, manual deployment was working seamlessly.
Okay. So guys, like I will give some like tips. The challenging part, like installing the RTF is very straightforward. You can simply use the RTF CTL utility for installing the RTF. It just have a four or five commands that you need to execute for installing the RTF. The main challenge for architecting or designing the self-managed Kubernetes, basically, right? That is the main challenge. Basically, you need to create VPC. Under VPC, you may have to create a private subnet, like public subnet, firewall subnet. Then you have to introduce internet gateway, net gateway, how the traffic will come inside, how the traffic will go inside. So these are the things very complex, basically. Like I have set up the RTF for one of the customer. So setting up RTF haven't took more than 1 day. Basically, we are able to do, but designing took like more than 1 or 2 months, basically, like so basically the designing and architecting the RTF is bit a complex, because it's not only you have to design and architecting the RTF, you also have to design the infrastructure. If you are like setting up the RTF on virtual machine or like bare metal server, then how many cores require, how the traffic will flow in, how the traffic will go out, whether I require last mile security, how the CPU bursting will work, how many V cores we require, right? So those kind of things are required. When we go to the self-managed Kubernetes, then we have to design our EKS also, elastic Kubernetes service, right? So what are the different firewall rules? Do we require firewall subnet? Do we require private subnet? Do we require public subnet? Do we require net gateway? How the traffic will come in, how traffic will be go out, right? So those kind of things. And also the CI/CD part, this is also one of the critical part when you are working with RTF. So I as per me, the CID is one of the critical path, basically. So I think the Siddhima is giving a great session on CI/CD, and she's giving a deep knowledge, like how you can implement the CI/CD with the RTF. So thanks, Siddhima, for that, and you can continue.
Yeah, I think I want to quickly start off on the demo part. So, guys, just whatever questions you have, just keep putting them in the chat, and I'll come back to your chat once I'm done with this demo. So, let's quickly understand how this deployment can be done. First of all, as I mentioned, the prerequisite, ensure that you're able to see my screen, right? One of you can just unmute and please respond to me so that I know that you're following what I'm saying.
Yes, we are able to see your call. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. So basically, see, this is the Cloud Hub. Sorry, so this is the Google Cloud console that you can see, and from this console, once you have created a trial account here, you should be able to see this, and from here you can navigate to different features here. For us, I have already created the cluster. So if I go to cluster here, Kubernetes engine cluster. If I go to cluster here, what happened? Just a second. Okay, I go to Kubernetes engine cluster. And you should be able to see it here. I have it already running. Just say reconnect. I'll probably tell you how to go there, but I think there's some issue on this. Okay, it's at least the console is working fine. I'll come back to this one. All that you need to do is just need to go to the Kubernetes engine and you'll be able to see your cluster there. And if you click on that cluster and then connect to the console, you should be able to see this console from where you can probably check whether your application is deployed, whether the pod has got created, and whether your application is running within that. You can view the logs and you can run your kubectl commands from here, even your rtf commands from here. Okay, so let's go to the Jenkins part and understand how you're doing the Jenkins setup. So in your Jenkins, if you go to the, this is my Jenkins page, how to set up Jenkins. I can share you the links and you can go through that. Just in the interest of time, I'm trying to shorten this interaction and demo. So if you look at the, if you once you come to the dashboard, you should be able to see manage Jenkins. So in manage Jenkins, right, you can just go to again manage configuration, manage Jenkins. So here you will see something that's called as installed. If you go to the installed part, these are all the plugins which are already installed. So you can check if Maven is installed. Okay, so this is important. Your Mule integration plugin is very, very important. Ensure that this is installed, and Mule release plugin. So, sorry, not Mule, it's Maven integration plugin. And also, you need to ensure your JDK is set up correctly. And yeah, and your Git plugin is also installed, right? So if I check for Git, yeah, so your Git plugin is installed. So these are the prerequisites. These are the same thing that you will do for any Jenkins setup. So these three things are very important: your Maven, your Git, and your uh, what is that? Yeah. So basically, your Maven,
Maven.
your Git. Yeah, that's right. So you need to have all these three things in place. Your JDK. Sorry, I missed that. Your JDK needs to be configured. All right. In case you have not installed, they will not be visible here on the installed page. You have to go to available. In available, you can actually go and check, um, say, from, if I say Maven. Right now, I will not see it because, sorry, right now you'll not see it because the reason is it's already installed. If you have not installed in the available, when you say Maven, it will automatically come in the drop down. Okay, the Maven integration plugin and so on and so forth, right? So you can choose the plugins from there and just click on them and say install and save. Okay, that's all that you need to do. Okay, and when you say you can install without restart or with restart, you have options. So you can select one of them and you can set up your Maven. The other important thing is ensure that you have put the settings.xml. So settings.xml of your Maven, right? So that needs to be configured. I have configured it using this managed file, I think so. So here I have uploaded the settings.xml file. How the settings.xml file would look like, I can show you that. Because that is important, because you want to use the auth token. So if you want to use the auth token, so most of the values are obfuscated because I cannot share the ID, username, passwords, and stuff like that of the Nexus. But you will need to replace these values with your customers or your enterprise user ID password of the Nexus. At the same time, this one is important. This is important. If you remember, if you recall what I had mentioned, here you will have the token. You'll say token, and here you will say auth token placeholder. So this is important. So this is your settings.xml, and also you'll also have to mention the org ID. In my case, it is the org ID would be placed here. I mean, it has to be placed here, and you need to ensure that your Maven Anypoint platform Maven URL is correctly configured. Okay, and the ID that you're using for your exchange, the server ID that you're using for your exchange, which from the repository from where your application will pull all the jars, this needs to match with what you're also configuring in your POM file. So that you need to keep in mind. In case you're working in Europe, if you have a European customer and they're using a European Anypoint platform, then you'd need to use V3. You should be using V3 here. And here in case of Maven, you'll be saying maven.eu1. So that path will change. So keep that also in mind. All right. So that's about your settings.xml file. I have already uploaded this to the Jenkins. Okay, so it's already here. This is important. Once you're done with this, then just creating pipeline should be very simple. So I can say create a new pipeline. I'll say, okay, I'll say Nashik CICD. Let's say RTF, say RTF, I'll say demo. Okay, and then I will select pipeline as an option for myself and say okay. Okay, description I'll keep the same. It simply say CICD. Okay. How do I want the trigger should happen? I would want it to simply poll because I do not have the right URLs, SSL URLs to create a webhook. But if you have an enterprise edition Git and also Jenkins, you can do that. You can actually create webhooks. But for now, just for our demo purpose, we will be doing the polling and we will set the interval. So I would be setting an interval of 2 minutes. So every 2 minutes, it will keep checking if there are any changes to the version control code. So if there are any changes, it will immediately trigger. So this is the trigger expression which I'm giving. So what it means is it will run after every 2 minutes. Here you can see this. So it is going to run after every 2 minutes. So 31, so it's 3310. Yeah. Uh, then then the pipeline script. I want the pipeline script should be taken from the version control, right? I already have the Jenkins file configured in the application, so it should take it up from there. And the Jenkins file name is this, and it should also ask me for the credentials, right? So here I will say git, okay, and it wants the URL. So let me take the URL. Okay, and I'll take this. I've already configured. If you haven't configured the credentials, you can do so. You just need to have do the add option. Go to the so how to do that? It's very simple. All that you need to do is you can go to your Git, and here in the application settings. Okay, you just go to the settings, and from there you should be able to generate the credentials that are required to be configured here. Okay. So how to do that? You should see a lot of documentation around that. We'll also share those links with you so you can follow that. You once you set this up, from where do I want to pull the code? I would say dev. Okay. So I want the code should be pulled from the dev branch. All right. And the file is Jenkins. I simply say save. All right. Now, what I have in my Git is important. I have a simple Mule application. This does not have any HTTP. It's a simple scheduler flow, which just has a scheduler and a logger. Very, very basic application. Okay. And let me check if I have anything on the Exchange. Okay. So I go to Exchange. I don't see any asset here. Now, very important for you to note, if I go here to Exchange, look like this. Okay, see the minute you go to Exchange, this is what you see. You see multiple different assets published here. But if you want to see the actual application, that is, you will not see the type as app here. Okay, so the Mule applications that you get that get deployed will not be visible on this page. So what you will have to, the trick is you'll have to do this. You'll have to do a question mark type is equal to app, and when you do that, it should be visible here. Okay. Um, so right now I don't see the application that I want should be deployed is this one, right? So it is, the application is simple Mule app. So I should be able to see that version there. Okay. So right now I've not made any changes and I don't have anything here, right? I don't have anything. So what I will do is I will just make a small change to the POM file. Okay. I'll just make a small change to the POM file. So that will give the polling option to get triggered. I've just set it to 1.0.0 because I don't have anything in Exchange right now. Okay. Oh, it's actually started, has it? Oh, it started. Oh, superb. So if it has actually started, we should see something here. Let me refresh it. Oh, it's come up. Do you see this? Oh, it's taken the previous version, which is fine. It's taken 1.0.4 version because it just got invoked. Okay, and it is trying to deploy to the application to the runtime manager. So let's go and see here. So you can see this, it's getting deployed here. So you can say view status. You can do this, you can check this. Okay, now I would also want to check the status of this application on the cluster, what is happening to that, right? So I can run few commands to check that. So all that I need to do is I want to run this command. It will list all the pods which are running in the environment. Okay, I just hope it works. Yeah, authorize. Yeah, so you can see here. So this is, it's saying it's running. Has it got deployed? It's still running. Okay, it's still running. Let's keep the command ready to check the logs, right? So if I go here, so this is my namespace and name. This I require. So these are the different pods that you're seeing which are running here. This is the command that you need to use. kubectl get pods, all namespaces. Okay. We will be sharing this with you, so you have it handy. So the command to look at the logs is this one, right? kubectl logs. Okay. So kubectl logs with the application name and namespaces. So the application name is this. The application name is this. Okay, which you see here, simple mule app with the unique ID appended to it. This is the mule application. And then the namespace is this. Usually the namespace is the environment ID. So it's dev environment ID, which it picks up. So, and we can also rename the namespaces if you want to. Okay, and ideally we do that in so that it's easier to use it. Like for example, I can create a namespace and I can create an alias for this namespace, this number, because numbers are not easier to manage, right? With this kind of a unique ID. So you probably want to give it a logical name, say like sandbox or dev. We can give those namespaces as well. But anyways, for just for your knowledge, you should know that. Okay, so if I check this, yeah, so it is deployed, you can see that, and it is also printed. This is a simple mule application for RTF. Okay, so this is just the application. So this is the application. So if you see this application here, all right, it's a simple scheduler, nothing much. All right, it runs every minute, and you can set it to run every second or maybe every hour, whatever you please to. So just, and it just has a logger, and whatever is there, the logger is got, it's coming here. So, and what do you see here? Okay, the second deployment also has got started, and the first one is also going through. Interesting. Okay.
Siddhima, meanwhile, can you please show your Jenkins file?
Yeah, Jenkins file. Yes, I'll show you that. So the Jenkins file. So if I go here in my dev branch, I go to the deploy.sh. Not deploy.sh. This is a script, I'll go to the Jenkins file. Okay, and this is my pipeline. Very basic, very basic. Nothing extraordinary. I've kept it very basic for you to understand. All that I'm trying to do here is, this is the command which will actually push it to the exchange. Okay, mvn clean deploy. That's all that you need to do. This command has to be run where your pom file exists. You can do it even from your if you have any mule application which is there on your in your say in your workspace. You can just go to that folder, navigate to the place where your pom file is there, and just run this. Just you have to run this command, just this command. Since it's a sh, I'm using a shell here because I'm using a Mac. Okay, if you're using bat, it will be a PowerShell, right? So for my case, since I'm using a Mac, I'm using sh. Okay, but if you're doing it from your local workspace, just use this much and it will publish the asset to the exchange. Okay, and the second thing that I do is, in the next stage of this pipeline step, what I do is I run this shell script which is deploy.sh. What this does, it only does two things. First is it gets the auth token, and second is it uses that auth token to run the mvn deploy command. So let's look at the deploy.sh. So this is my deploy.sh. Okay. So you can see here, I'm using this API call to get the auth token. You see this? I'm making this API call to get the auth token. So how that would look like is, I'll just show it to you. So this is my authentication call. So what is there? This is the endpoint. All right. And I'm passing the client ID secret from the connected app. Now, when you say connected app, I can show you. Okay, this has got deployed, guys. This is deployed. But let me show you the connected app. So if I go to the connected app, go to the access management. I go to connected apps. There are a lot of connected apps. This is my Devo team account. So you'll see a lot of things happening there. So this is the connected app that I have created. Okay, you can see this, right? And this is the scope that I have provided to it. In my case, there are two environments like dev and test. I've provided it, but you can give as many number of applications. Ideally, the best practice is you should create one connected app for one environment. For test, you should create a separate connected app, and for dev, you should create a separate connected app. For a pre-prod, you create a separate connected app, and for a prod, you basically one connected app per environment is a best practice. Okay, so you can create a connected app that way. Okay. So now if I look at this connected app, you see this RTF deploy connected app CA, right? So here there's an option to say copy ID and copy secret. All right. So when you say copy ID, it'll be copied and you can actually put it here, right? I'm just putting it here. So you can see it's the same, right? So you can put the client ID and secret, and the grant type will be fixed. It will be client credentials. And when you hit on it, you will get the access token. So this is that API which will get you the access token. Okay. So that is the idea basically. So here in your script, what happens is, where did I go? Let's see. Yeah. So that is what we are trying to do. We are trying to get that connected app, and then we are trying to extract the access token from the response. Here I have not used the JQ because I did not set it up, but you can use JQ. If you use the JQ utility, you should be able to parse it in a much more standardized way. And that sample is already there in the presentation that I shared. So you can use that. That should be much more standard way of implementing it. Okay, so you can get the access token, and what we do with this access token, we're passing this access token to this deployment command. So it's a mvn clean deploy, mvn clean package deploy. So what it does is it will deploy to the environment. What are the different parameters that go? Most important, remember, we are passing the access token which we have fetched at the runtime. So, and one more thing you need to remember, this access token has a TTL of 1 hour. Okay, so it will be valid for 1 hour. But irrespective of that, every time you're making a call, you're anyways making a call to this what is this API and fetching the access token. You're not using the user ID, password, or anything else. You're going with a much more secure option of generating an access token from the connected app and then injecting that into your POM file for deployment. So it's a much more secure access establishment for your deployment, right? And connectivity between your application to the environment to which it is getting deployed. Then you're passing the RTF app name, okay, the application name which you application which you want to deploy. Then the deployment target should be the cluster name. So whatever is the cluster name, that is what you will pass. So in my case, it will be here somewhere. Deployment target, right? So it is RTF GKE SIDD is what I have created. You should be able to see it. I don't know why it's saying that. Let's see. Not have sufficient permissions. Is my. Let me open a new window. Now you should be able to see it here. I think it was just a UI quirk. Okay, so if you look at this, this is the cluster. So you click on the cluster, and then if you just do this, this is your RTF cluster that I have created. How to create this? There's a Kochi meetup which happened, I think maybe a month back or so, and I did a demo on that. You can refer that, and you can create your own cluster. You can use that to create a cluster, and then you can probably implement CI/CD on top of that. So if you do a connect here, right, and then go with this run in Cloud Shell, so you should be able to see. You don't have to install a separate what is that CLI tool and all of that stuff, right? It's very easy to use it using this GKE. Sometimes it just is a little messy. Let's say open terminal. Okay, it's here. So you can see this, and here you can run all your kubectl commands. Okay, if I want to run my command again to just check the logs, I think we ran this command, right? Let's just run this command to check the logs. No, this does not exist. Why not? Let's run the pods command, because it again got deployed. You need to remember, every time it deploys, it will create a new pod. Okay, so the pod name might have got changed. So you will see this change has happened. Please make note of that. So if you see this, the name has got changed. You see this? So I'll be taking this and I'll be replacing it here.
Yeah, basically this is the SARD ID. We call this as a SARD ID
Yeah,
or pod ID, something like the SARD. Yeah.
yeah. So you can see that it has run every minute, and you can see the logs are updated here. Okay, so that is about your Jenkins file. It has got deployed. Now, what I want to do is, let me manually, I will not make any changes to the code. Okay, I'm just going to run the build manually. Okay, I'm just triggering the build. I think it has got triggered. Now you'll have to observe carefully. If I'm technically right, this deployment should not go through. Even the deployment to Exchange should fail. Okay, and why it will fail is because, well, first let it fail. I don't know if I've made any changes. Oh, it will. Yeah, it has failed. The reason why it has failed is, you can just go to the console and take a look, and it will very clearly tell you that the asset already exists. Okay, so if you go to what is it? Changes.
In the pipeline, you need to click on pipeline and then console.
Yeah, that's right. Let me click here first. Here, and then say console output. Yeah, so if you see this, here you see this, it's saying somewhere it will say it exists. It says 409 conflict, and this will happen only if the asset already exists. So what you'll have to do is, you'll have to increment the POM version and then do a deploy. Now what I can do is, let me increment the version. Also, let's look at what is already there in the Exchange. So if I refresh this page, it's 104 is the last version. I'll make it 105. Okay, you can do it from your command line also, but just to save time, I'm trying to do it from here. I make it 105. This is in the dev branch, right? It isn't dev. Yeah, it isn't dev. So I made it 105 now. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to trigger a build, because I don't want to wait for 2 minutes. So what I can do is, I can go here. Okay, and I just trigger a build. This should go through. I don't see an issue with that, because now I have incremented the POM version. So one of the important things for your CI/CD actual implementation, when you do it with your customer, you should also keep in mind that you should also ensure that you, in your script, you check if that asset is already existing. So in your shell script or your Jenkins pipeline script itself, you should check if the asset is already existing. So you see this went through, right? So if you see here, you see 105 has come in. So you should check whether your application is already existing, your asset is already existing in Exchange. And if you really have made a change and you want to continue with the same asset version, for example, I already have 105, but I want to make a deployment for 105 itself, but I've made some changes in code, I don't want to increment the POM version. If you have a scenario like that, and there might be scenarios that way, in that case what you can do is you'll have to delete this asset from the exchange. And to do that, in your script you can make an API call to delete the asset. And how to do that, I think I've shared that in the presentation. So when you can take a look at that, and you can even implement that. So you can actually delete the asset from the exchange using that script. Basically, it's an API call that you'll need to do,
Okay,
right?
one quick question, Satyama.
Yeah.
So, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, so let's say today I'm doing some deployment into my SIT environment, and I have limited capacity of reserved CPU and memory, right? If I keep on building all the assets and deploying all of these applications type into my SIT environment, right? I mean, you call it as non-prod cluster, right? So
Yeah.
one day this version will increase to 10, 20, 30. Is there a
Mhm.
way I can automatically clean up all of the previous assets which are not in use or marked as stable or some, I mean, marked as deprecated?
Yes, yes, you can do that. What you can do is, yeah, in your script, you'll have to ensure you can use the leverage the same delete option, right? Which I mentioned. So if you remember this, we have it here somewhere. Check if the asset already exists, and if it exists, you can delete it as well. So there is somewhere where we mention about deleting this asset. If it is not there, I can share it also with you. But yes, you can. There is a API that you can use to delete that from Exchange. To answer your question, like if you're right, because that is one of the problems that we usually face with RTF deployments, right? You'll be making n number of deployments, and this will keep incrementing every time. But you don't want to have those many versions of the asset in the Exchange. So what you can do is you can check in certain cases. You in your script you can ensure that you first check whether asset is already existing. In some cases, even if it is existing, if you want to delete it, you can do that. You can actually issue the delete what is that API call, and you can delete that from your exchange. So that way you can standardize. But how you want to design that, it's up to you. You know how your customer wants it or how you want it technically. It's up to you, but we have an option to delete it. You can delete it first, and then you can deploy the latest asset that you want to. So you can do that, and you can give some flags. You can set some flags due to like if that flag is existing, in that case only you go ahead and you delete, or else you don't. So you can have that logic. You can implement that. Does that answer your question? Am I audible?
Yes, 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 yeah.
I don't know who asked the question, but does that answer your question?
I think he got dropped from the call.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think I can see a couple of questions here in the chat window. Is there anything else that I've missed in the demo part? I think this is the deployment that we've seen, right? So let's look at this. So this has gone through. You can see this. So since we have incremented the POM version, it's able to publish it to the exchange, and also then make a deployment to the runtime fabric cluster. So I hope this concept is clear to you now, that this is very important. These two steps are very important. That's the whole gist of the CI/CD implementation, or the quirk for CI/CD for RTF specifically. Okay. Okay, I'll go back to this window. Let me see if I have some questions here.
Siddhima, Ashish here.
Yeah, tell me, Ashish.
Yeah, so we have deployed it, right? So, what's the best rollback strategy, Siddhima? This, most of the time you'll face some issues with the current deployment, right? In
Yeah,
RTF, we'll see in the runtime manager itself the previous deployment, but
yeah,
sometime we need to delete those, right?
yes.
So if you
So,
delete the previous version, then it will be difficult to go rollback, right? So what's the best practices for rollback?
when I explained to you about this CI/CD platform, sorry, CI/CD approach, right? So if I go back, you're able to see this. You can see my slide, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So here, right, there are two places where you have the asset now. Okay, you want to roll back, right? First of all, remember one thing: always, whenever the deployment actually happens, it pulls that asset from the exchange. So you always have that available in your exchange. So that's how it is able to maintain a high availability. All right, that's the pointer number one. The second is, when you are building your CI/CD, it's also recommended that you publish your asset to the artifactory, either Nexus, JFrog, or any other artifactory that you might be using for your customer, right? So there are two places. One, why are we having this? I had emphasized that you need to have this because Exchange might have multiple different versions, and it might be very difficult to pinpoint and say this is the business version which I want to roll out in my production environment. So in your artifactory, you can create those folder structures, and you can kind of standardize which versions you want to maintain. So whenever you want to roll back, you can always pull that asset from your Nexus and take that built jar from your Nexus or your, let's put it as artifactory, right, from your artifactory, and then publish it to the Exchange. And if that version already exists, you also have an option to delete it from Exchange and then do the deployment. So that way you can kind of technically achieve that kind of kind of roll back to a previous one. But there's also one more point that I want to share with you, is that if you go to your runtime fabric, right, you can see this, what has been deployed. You can also see the previous versions here. You can see this is also visible for you.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that way also.
this is what I was referring. Yeah.
Yeah, so
But the
this is also
previous,
visible for you.
yeah, so the situation here is, let's say the previous version I am referring, right? And then that is, let's say, so that is actually referring the Exchange one, right?
Yeah,
Because that metadata will be coming from the Exchange only. Now let's say
you can
somebody, I
manipulate.
mean,
Ashish, you
yeah.
can always manipulate that. You can delete that version from here. You can
Uh-huh.
again pull it from your artifactory, again publish it to Exchange, and then you can play around with it. That's not a
Oh,
problem
yeah,
at
yeah,
all.
yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
can
got it,
always do that.
yeah,
You can
got
always
it.
do that.
So,
But you have to be very careful. This has to be very clearly and very in a very crisp way, very clean way. It has to be designed on your paper first. First design it properly, and then you can implement. Technically, this is how you can do. You have the APIs. You have the APIs to delete the asset from the Exchange. You have the script which can take care of automating this whole thing. But it's very important that you design this approach. That's important. And also you need to understand what are your constraints for your environment, which you said, like for a site you have memory constraint and you want to keep it clean. So I think that would be the best way. The delete option is very important. You need to explore that. Yeah.
yeah, thanks, Siddhima. And
Yeah.
generally, I mean, when I go for the clients, right, best
Yeah.
practices, generally
Yeah.
we keep the last two versions over there in the Exchange, at least two versions.
At
So
least
for
two versions.
example, yeah, for example, if I'm going for 1.5, right, 1.0.5 or something,
Yeah.
then 4 and 3 will be there. So
Right.
that is how we maintain for the rollback strategy.
So, but I think, which I mentioned to you, use your artifact to your Nexus or JFrog, whatever you might be using for your customer. Use that effectively. Maintain your versions properly there. So you very clear, because as Exchange kind of tends to get a little messy, because a lot of deployments happening. Imagine in our SIT you're doing a lot of integration testing, a lot of bug fixes happening, a lot of deployments happening. So there are chances that your Exchange is a little messy. It has multiple different versions which you even don't need. So if you want to keep it clean, you need to design it in such a way that your deployment script in such a way that it cleans up, it deletes the unnecessary versions, right? You test it and see how this works basically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, thanks, Siddhima.
Yeah, so let me go back to the screen and see if there are more questions. Can we have the demo briefly? I was just understanding conflict. Sagnik, are you still there on the call or have you dropped off?
No, I'm still there. It was a previous question. I think 36
Okay,
minutes.
so does this make sense? I mean, do you, not sense as in, I just want to understand how relevant this is now. I'm
Yeah.
not very clear with this one, if you would want to elaborate.
No, I'm saying I asked this previously, so I think that's okay.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to jump to the demo. It would just like take me like, if you see the demo part, it doesn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes for the demo part, right? Because I have the cluster already set up and I have the Jenkins already set up. So it takes you very little time. The script is already there. So it doesn't take much time to do it. I can share that repository with you folks. You can give it a try. And how to set up the cluster, as I already told you, that you can refer the previous video where I did the GKE setup. It takes you just 15 to 20 minutes to set it up. You can set it up and you can use that for your CI/CD implementation. The only thing, the additional thing is that you ensure your org admin for which your of your anypoint platform has given you access to the RTF. That's all. Yeah, so you can try it. All right. Have you managed multiple environment deployments in Jenkins Dev? Yes. Hari, to answer your question, if you're there, yes, we have done that, and it is achievable to do that. I think I explained that um, in this slide here. Sorry, I'm not keeping well. It's a bit of a So to answer your question, Hari, yes, you can do deployments to multiple environments. You can implement two different pipelines. The one pipeline, the first pipeline will only publish the asset to the exchange, okay? And the second pipeline, which will do deployment to different environments. And when we are doing the MVN deployment, what the step that we are actually implementing is this one, right? So we are implementing, where is the Jenkins file? So we are only doing this step, right? Sorry, we are only doing this step, right? So when we're calling this deploy.sh, in that one, we can ensure that we override the property values for that particular environment, and we can ensure we can deploy the same jar file into multiple environments, right? So we can do that. So we can only run only the deploy command. If you have, see, just remember one thing technically, right? Uh, in your Jenkins, if you already have it in Exchange, you should not be able to, you do not need to do this step of publishing it to Exchange. If you already have the asset in your Exchange, when you have deployed it to dev, you should only execute this stage number 2, where we are deploying to RTF multiple times to different environments. And the only change that will happen is the parameters that go into the deployment environment, because the cluster might be different, the environment ID, client ID, client secret will be different, the connected app credentials will be different. So the parameters that feed into that deploy command only for the step 2, we can do only step 2 if the step 1 has already been implemented once for or executed once for dev environment. For SIT and prod, you just need to execute only the second step, because the asset is already available in the exchange. So you should be able to deploy it. Technically, you should be able to do it. Yes. So I hope that answers your question. What is the next one? Can we pass client secrets from Jenkins instead of deploy? Yes, you can do that. Madhusudan, to your questions, yes, you can do that. You can directly do that in your pipeline itself. The only thing is, Shell gives you a much more of a, I'm not sure if you're already there in the call, you can unmute yourself. But basically, yes, you can do that. You can do it from your Jenkins pipeline directly without calling the deploy.sh. So that's the answer to your question. Then Shreyas, is there a way to get the auth token from connected app in Jenkins file, or can we need to create? No, you will have to make, see, the idea is, Shreyas, if you're there in the call, are you there on the call? Okay. If you're hearing me, so this is it. So basically, the idea of getting the auth token is making that REST API call, which I showed you. Okay. This is the REST API call that you're doing to get the auth token. So you need to do it somewhere. So we are using the curl utility to make that API call, get the auth token, parse that response, and capture that auth token, and then inject it into the pom.xml file. And by issuing the mvn deploy command. So that is the whole idea of that. Now, if your question is there a way to get the auth token for connected app in Jenkins file? This is, or do we need to? We don't need to always do the deploy.sh. You can directly write that in the Jenkins file itself. Directly in your Jenkins file, you can feed that. You can make that call and get. You can use the curl. You can use the curl and JQ directly. Curl and JQ. Utility directly in your Jenkins file and fetch the auth token. You need not have to do a deploy.sh. That, I hope that answers your question. Okay. Can you show where your script on the GitHub repo? Are you checking for the presence of asset in exchange? No, I'm not right now. Sagnik, to answer your question, I'm not right now checking whether the asset is there in the exchange. Okay.
Got that. Got that. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not doing that, but you can do it. There is a script. There are APIs available. You can do it. Okay. And that the reason why we are not doing it, only you are able to see that when I did a deployment without making any manual deployment, manual trigger through Jenkins, without making any change to the version, it failed, right? So I hope that answers your question. Could I see that snippet in your slide? Yeah, it is there. The slip and the snippet is there in the slide.
Yeah, yeah.
Raghav. Okay, so
Yes.
it will be shared with you. Okay, so I think I pretty much answered all the questions. Anything else, Jitendra? If I've missed, I think we're pretty much done. I think we can go for the quiz.
No, we have covered everything.
Sorry to interrupt. I got disconnected in between, so I missed some part. Siddhima, one last question. So,
Yes,
is it
please.
possible that in case if we keep on increasing the version and publishing it to Exchange, can we mark the previous version as deprecated?
I have not tried this to be honest,
Yes, you can
Abhishek,
do
but
that.
I can. Yeah.
So basically,
No,
Okay, and
you
we
can
can
like,
automatically create a script which can delete, let's say, two, three. Sorry.
see, you basically you can make, there is some concept of tags basically, right? You can allocate the tags, so you can mark that previous, you can allocate deprecated tag to the previous version. That is possible.
yeah, on the console we can definitely do that. I have seen it, but in the script, to be honest, I have not done it. But
No, I have
yes,
done it.
technically
Like
it should be
you
possible
can
to
do
do it.
that. Like you can use the anypoint CLI, and in anypoint CLI you can pass that deprecate, like so tag name as a deprecated. That's possible.
Great.
Okay, thanks. And by any chance, if we need to roll back to the previous version, we again need to mark the deprecate to active and delete the latest one, right?
Yeah, you can remove that tag. Simple.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your answer.
Okay. So Jitendra, do you want to move to the next one, or do we still have questions?
No,
I
I
don't see
don't
any.
think we have a question. Okay.
So there's a question: can we get access to the video after this call?
Yeah, you can go
So
to event page and you can get the access from there basically. Okay,
okay,
after 24 hours.
okay, all right, perfect. So then, what next? Should I start with the quiz with the team?
So let me do that quiz, like
Oh, okay,
So yeah,
okay. So I'll
I will.
stop sharing then. I'll
Yeah,
stop sharing. Yeah, okay.
I will just stop the recording.